So, with World War II, we're going to look at how the war affected American society and Americans on the home front. So, the question would be at that time, are you doing your part? So, you'll read this, but we have to sell this war to the American people because we were an isolationist nation or a unilateralist nation going into World War II, and FDR understood that we need to get the word out to the American people exactly while we're fighting. Yes, Japan bombing Pearl Harbor was horrible. People are motivated for that to get back at the Japanese. But remember, we do have that other theater in Europe, so why is it important to send troops into that theater as well? So, selling the war, Roosevelt provides he calls it the four freedoms. He provides four main reasons why we need to fight, and that would be freedom of speech and expression worldwide, freedom of worship, that would be freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear for all peoples throughout the world. And he gives a speech on it, which you may have already read or you're going to read. And here are posters dealing with each one of these freedoms that were posted up throughout the U.S. And we have different types of posters in each category, but those are some of the main ones. Locally, how does World War II affect Wilmington? Here's some pictures of Liberty ships that were built here in Wilmington and that were stored here in Wilmington after the war. First off, Fort Fisher is an Air Force base, and you can still go down to Fort Fisher and see some of the airstrip. It's still there. And they flew reconnaissance flights over the coast of southeastern North Carolina and into South Carolina and looking for German U-boats. You say, wait a minute, there are German U-boats along the eastern shore of the U.S., and you'd be right. We actually have one sank right off the coast of Wilmington here, right up there about a mile south of what is the Oceanic and used to be called Crystal Pier, but it's about a mile and a half off the coast, and you can actually go and scuba dive it. At low tide, you used to be able to see the top of the sub. So we had so Fort Fisher was an Air Force base and provided a service there. We had blackouts basically during World War II. Anybody who lived along the eastern or western coast were required to turn out all lights at dark. You couldn't have lights on because of these U-boats and enemies, being able to spot populated areas. We had two German POW camps in Wilmington, one on the corner of Shipyard and Carolina Beach Road over, I'm trying to think how you would say it. It's over where that hotel is now, across from Rose's. And we had another one downtown on 10th Street where Robert Strange Park in that area is today. So we had two German POW camps, and my dad remembers seeing the German POWs. Shipbuilding in Wilmington, we were one of the largest shipbuilding facilities in World War II. We built ships where the modern day state port is, and we also built ships across from downtown on Eagles Island. If you look at some of these pictures, if you look at the top right, far right hand side, these pictures were taken of Liberty ships right where the state port is today. The two bottom pictures, these are Liberty ships after World War II, and these were anchored in what is the Brunswick River. Today, when you cross the bridge into Leland, this is where that is. These are those ships. And I've got relatives. My dad also remembers just seeing these ships as he crossed the old bridge, and you could see these things. These will become our first cargo carriers, private industry cargo carriers that lead to tankers and super tankers after World War II. But these are the backbone of World War II, Liberty ships. So, preparedness for the war. Just like to throw out there, that the Selective Service is enacted, and it will be in service. We will use the Selective Service until 1973. This is the draft. This is what all 18-year-olds have to sign up for, all male boy 18-year-olds. Once you turn 18, you got to sign up for the Selective Service. We were not prepared for World War II. Bottom line, we were not prepared for war. We didn't prepare for training and or WAR, war. Isolation left our military weak. We had one combat-ready battalion. Compare that to our enemies. At the onset of World War II, Japan had 100 combat-ready battalions, and Germany had 200 combat-ready battalions. Not only that, our training for our GIs really was bad. We had trucks labeled tanks. We used 1-pound flour bags and catapults to train our soldiers how to shoot a gun at a tank. We had balloons used as ships. So our boot camp was not very good. We had to revamp everything. When Pearl Harbor happened, soon after, we have 5 million men volunteer for service. We have another 10 million that were drafted. So we have a huge armed services influx real quickly after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Our services will still be segregated. So you need to know some of these. Let's see. So, agencies created to control all aspects of the economy and war. Roosevelt enacts the National Defense Act, which is basically the president's going to take control of a lot of industries. And he does this within 24 hours after Pearl Harbor. And basically, he's going to direct all civilian companies to work with the war effort. And basically, these companies will start producing wartime goods. What about the American public? We're going to have to ration things out amongst ourselves, and we're going to live with some of these companies producing goods for us, but the main effort of these companies is going to be for the war. Like Ford Motor Industries, the last new car produced, I think, was in January, February of 1942. They won't produce a new car until 1946. I think February, somewhere along in there of 46. You can look that up. So what did Ford Motor Company do? They produced tanks. They produced trucks. They produced what is now Jeeps. They produced wartime materials. And this was at the direction of your president, and he made this decision within 24 hours of after Pearl Harbor's bombing. These agencies were created to control every aspect of our economy during the war. The Office of Civilian Defense, the Office of War Information, the War Production Board, put a star by because this deals with our economy, and you may see that on your knowledge check or your test. National War Labor Board and Office of Price Administration. We're going to control prices during this war as well to make things reasonable for the American people. So here's what the War Production Board does. All right. They controlled the nation's economy. They converted all of our peacetime industries to war industries, like automakers. I told you, becoming tank makers, Liberty ship makers, like here in Wilmington. Increased production. The U.S. economy makes a drastic change for the better out of our depression. World War II gets us out of the depression. So if you look at this picture over here, what does this picture suggest? What does this image suggest? We're going to outproduce Germany, and we're going to beat them. So here's what you can do at home. You can plant victory gardens. In other words, have your own vegetable garden. So you don't have to go to the store, because those goods at the store are going to be used for soldiers. You can buy war bonds to help finance the war, and the government will pay you back at the end of the war. You can join the USO, U.S. Services Organization, to entertain and provide for soldiers and their families. You can conserve and follow rationing laws. Rationing was a way of distributing goods fairly, and it was a way to conserve goods as well. If you look here, here's a picture of the rationing boards. I believe this was in Chicago or maybe New York City. I can't remember which one is a major city though. As you see, shoes rationing board, you have books. And if you look down here, there's gasoline, there's tires. So you were rationed on your everything, your food, your gas, your tires, your drinks, your alcohol. And people would trade books. If they didn't need tires, they would trade somebody else for more food. So this stuff went on during the war. I actually have a book of rations to show you, but I don't know if I can get them scanned in and online in time. So what can you do at home? Scrap drives. Kids used to go around and grab scrap metal. My dad was one of them. Grab scrap metal, rubber, steel, and you would collect this, and you would have boards and stuff you'd give it to, so they would convert that into wartime materials. So women during the war. So they played many different roles. As you see the poster here, Rosie the Riveter, a symbol of women in the workforce. Guys, women are going to join in all these factories because men, 15 million of them, have joined the military. You have the WACS. That's WACS. This is Women's Army Corps. Not up here. Let's see if I've got it on the next slide. Nope, I don't. Not up here are a couple of other women's roles in the military. The women used to be in the Air Force. You had the WASPs, but women used to fly planes over the continental U.S. They'd fly all these bombers and they'd fly all these fighters. They'd fly them from the East Coast to the West Coast or the West Coast to the East Coast, so they would be shipped overseas to serve in World War II. Women played a vital role during World War II, and women, unlike World War I, they're not going to go back home after this war. A lot of women like working in the workplace, and they're going to demand they stay in the workplace and they have a right in the workplace. And this is going to lead to the women's rights movement. So here's another movement that's going to start. African Americans' roles. They're still segregated. When stationed in the South, when they were off base, they had to follow Jim Crow laws. Even though on base they were treated as equals, off base they were not in the South. The Great Migration will continue. African Americans will move up north more. This continues. Double V campaign, victory over racism abroad and at home. African Americans knew that they had to defeat racism at home as well. You have the Tuskegee Airmen. Check them out. They fight very valiantly during World War II, especially toward the end when they are escorting a lot of the bomber raids in Europe. So this is a watershed moment for African American civil rights as well. They are not going to want to go back to doing business as usual after World War II, and they're going to start demanding rights. Not to say that they accepted it after World War I, but the movement will continue to grow. So, civil rights leader James Farmer founded an interracial movement called Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE, which would confront urban segregation in the North. We'll talk about this a little bit later. The freedom rides down south, this is CORE's doing. And if you've watched the movie The Great Debater with, what's his name? Denzel Washington. The kid in the movie at Wiley College was James Farmer, the same James Farmer. Anyway, racial tensions increased, and in 1943, violence swept through the nation, and as you see here in Detroit, it's the worst. You have 9 whites die in these race riots, and 25 African Americans die. Or, my bad. Yeah, 25. So I'm going to stop here, and we'll pick up with part 2